to the Fully Charged Show podcast. Now, this one is a little bit different. It's a news roundup, and it's just me on the show this week. So it's a bit of an experiment to see if this works. Because it just means that when things are difficult to get other people to come on the show and organise when we record it and all that stuff, if I can do news updates like this, it's a lot better than nothing. That's the alternative. Because we haven't, for numerous reasons, too tedious and boring to go into, we haven't been able to record any interviews in time for this week's show. But actually, on Monday, I'm interviewing someone. I'm doing about 3 recordings next week. So there's definitely lots more coming. But please let me reassure you, we have lots of interesting people to talk to on the show. And there's a more important reason for doing this particular news update. Now, as always, my inbox, Twitter feed, LinkedIn feed, YouTube comments feed, emails is littered with links to stories people have posted and that are relevant to Fully Charged. I mean, it's fairly obvious that without a team of 200 editors, a massive budget, a huge tower block in the centre of one of the world's major urban conurbations, a massive newsroom with people walking around with clipboards and phones and hundreds of people talking and pointing at laptops in the background while I deliver the news. Yeah, we're never going to quite manage to do that, and we're never going to be able to cover all the stories on the regular Fully Charged Show YouTube or soon Amazon Prime channels. More news on that as we have it. So I thought I'd gather together a small handful of stories and talk about them on the podcast and hope that some of you find this interesting. And I will put all the links to all these stories in the show notes. So that was simple. That was straightforward. Last week I started gathering notes and stories, and I got my handful of stories, and then the Tesla battery announcement happened. And let's face it, in the world of Fully Charged that we focus on, this is a fairly big story. I learned really early, before electric cars became a thing, back in the mid-noughties, or even the early noughties, that battery technology was developing very rapidly. I spoke with software engineers and battery boffins in the UK and the USA who were working on the systems that are common in electric cars today, but were kind of an esoteric backwater then. So I think we kind of got used to the slow incremental increase in battery energy density, the slow but steady decrease in battery cost. And we're starting to see the results of those changes, certainly in cars, but also in large grid stale, sometimes the grid is stale, but a fresh grid is nice. Large grid scale storage batteries, and of course batteries in your house, which clearly a lot of people have, but far more people want. This is going to be a really big growth area. But then, what was revealed in the very long, because it's over 3 hours, but very impressive presentation that Elon Musk and Tesla, the team at Tesla, did this week, is that there appears to be a tailing off of these steady improvements as regards battery. The costs are falling, but not by that much anymore. Energy density is increasing, but not by that much anymore. It's kind of reached a sort of low plateau level. So someone needs to do something, and as I'm sure most of you are all aware, all the legacy car companies in the world are doing not much about this. Sure, I mean, they're buying batteries from massive Chinese, Korean, and in some cases Scandinavian countries, but they, as car makers, are doing nothing to improve those batteries. They might be improving the battery packs. They might be finding new, innovative, cheaper, more energy efficient ways of cooling and heating those batteries. Those are all really important, but they're not manufacturing the battery cells themselves. It's a stupid question I've asked so many car manufacturers. What are the batteries here? Do you make them? Nissan did for a while make batteries, but they've farmed that out. So, they don't make batteries. Which car company in the world at present manufactures a large proportion of their own batteries? The answer is simple. The list is short. It's Tesla. So they're already making a large proportion of the batteries, not only for the cars, but for the power walls and the power packs. But what they announced was nothing short, I'm going to say this, might be criticised, might be shot down in flames, very used to that. Nothing short of a quantum leap in that manufacturing capability. That's the important thing. It's not so much the actual batteries themselves, it's the scale of the manufacturing capability. Now, some of you will have heard of the Gigafactory in Sparks, Nevada. Although it's already producing batteries, it is far from complete. It's going to be a huge building. When it is, or if, and when it is actually completed, it will reputedly be the biggest building on the planet in terms of footprint. It's just huge. And this capacity can produce around about, because it depends who you ask and which report you believe, but around about 150 gigawatt hours of batteries a year. That sounds like a hell of a lot. Just to put that in some kind of context, all the batteries made in all the factories on the planet as recently as 2014 could only produce around 140 gigawatt hours a year. So already Tesla alone has literally doubled the global output of batteries. But now they are building the Terafactory outside Austin, Texas. In fact, very close to where Fully Charged USA was held earlier this year. So the Gigafactory produces gigawatt hours of batteries a year. The Terafactory will produce terawatt hours of batteries a year. And I'm going to do a list now, a breakdown list. For those few of you, because most of you, I know you will know all this before, but so bear with me, because this is for the one or two listeners who haven't got an advanced degree in electronics or nuclear physics or particle physics or quantum physics. There's one or two of you who don't have those qualifications that listen to the Fully Charged Show podcast. So bear with me while I go through this. What is a terawatt? It's 1,000 gigawatts. What is a gigawatt? It's 1,000 megawatts. What is a megawatt? It's 1,000 kilowatts. What is a kilowatt? It's 1,000 watts. Now, think of an old-fashioned 50-watt bulb. You can light 20 50 kilowatt bulbs with 1 kilowatt. If you have a kilowatt hour of stored electricity, you can light those 20 50 kilowatt bulbs for 1 hour. Now, I know you know that, but that just puts it into some kind of context that we can sort of grapple with. So a terawatt hour is clearly a huge amount of electricity. I mean, the thing is, I've met an enormous number of people. I mean, I'm talking many hundreds who haven't got a clue what a kilowatt hour is. I don't bother to ask anymore, but for a long time, in my quiet obsessions, I would say, do you actually know what a kilowatt hour is? Do you know what your annual kilowatt hour consumption is? You know, people would just run away screaming, but they didn't know. And I didn't know. I didn't know before I had an electric car. But as soon as you do have an electric car, you become very aware of them. So Tesla are saying that in 3 years, and we'll get back to that point in a moment, not tomorrow, not next month, 3 years, they will be producing over a terawatt hour of batteries every year. These batteries will be around half the cost of current batteries, so sub $100 per kilowatt hour. They will be somewhere around 20% more energy dense, depending on so many factors and who you choose to believe, but somewhere around that. Some people are saying 50% more. I don't think that, I can't find anything to justify that. And believe me, I've looked. But the important thing is they will last longer, as in be able to charge and discharge more times. Elon Musk stated that they needed to produce a sub $25,000 smaller, potentially fully autonomous car by 2023 in order to make electric cars more viable. That is a sub £20,000 or a sub €21,000 vehicle. And more importantly than any of this, it's the sheer quantity that is needed to enable the full transition away from burning hydrocarbons, which is kind of what we need to do as fast as we possibly can. Stop burning hydrocarbons would be a big step. At least reduce it by about 95%. That would be good enough. Not just cars, but massive terawatt-hour grid storage, which enables greater adoption of cheap, clean, renewable energy. So the key points I garnered from this 3-hour-long presentation were a new cell design. Instead of the 2170 cells that Tesla currently uses, and those are the ones that are in, for instance, my Model 3, the new ones are 4680s. That means they're 46 millimeters wide by 80 millimeters in length, a bit longer and a bit fatter than the current cells. They will have dry electrodes, which make them cheaper, easier to mass produce, and have a longer lifespan. They will have a silicon anode. Now, silicon can store 9 times more lithium than existing designs, and therefore can contain more energy. They are approaching a cobalt-free cathode. No more cobalt in batteries. Cobalt will only be used to make stainless steel and to refine fossil fuels to remove sulfur, particularly from diesel. Always remember that if any of your relatives or an annoying uncle at Christmas or some know-all petrol head says, oh, you've got to have cobalt for your batteries and it's dug up by children. You go, no, we don't need much cobalt on our batteries, and you use far more to refine your precious fossil fuel. That's where cobalt is used. Always, always rub that in. Rub it in. Cobalt is used in oil refining to a far larger extent, and it can't be reused. Cobalt in a battery can be extracted, refined, and reused. Cobalt used in oil refining is used once. Just want to rub it in. We've got to be able to back the outrageous falsehoods that are pumped out by the lobbying groups that are paid millions of pounds every year to spread nonsense about brake dust and tyre dust and electric cars are dirtier than diesel. I just had a little rant there. It's a micro rant. I'm over it. So there was a huge focus throughout this presentation on driving the costs of manufacturing down. And so they've been doing an enormous amount of work with manufacturers who produce battery-making machinery, because what they're trying to do is produce the maximum number of batteries at the minimum cost. And they are claiming they can reduce these costs by 56%. These new batteries are more energy dense and will increase the range of the vehicles that they're put in by 16%. Now, when we did this presentation the other night, when it was actually on, when Roger Atkins and I were talking about this, thankfully he can do maths. So I was saying, if you've got a car that can do 300 miles on a charge now, and it improves by 16%, same weight battery, same size battery, 16% more energy, how much further can you do? And it's about 48 miles more. So you'll have a car that does, say, 350 miles, roughly. That's the thing. But that's the important thing. This is the same physical size and weight, but you get 16% more miles or kilometers. Altogether, Tesla claimed this will lead to an initial cost reduction of 14% in US dollars per kilowatt hour, which I estimate means they can produce batteries for well under 100 kilowatt hours, $100 per kilowatt hour. That's the critical thing. $100 per kilowatt hour. Currently, batteries that when you buy a new electric car now, the batteries are coming in between, say, $120 and $140 a kilowatt hour battery cost, not battery pack cost is additional to that. However, that reduction was just down to new cell design. If you add in the different anode and cathode material, the cell to vehicle integration, they're talking about using the battery pack as a structural element in the car. So this is in new cars they're developing now. And the cost reductions in the actual cell manufacturing, the overall costs could be as low as $48 a kilowatt hour. If that is true, listeners, if that turns out to be the case in 2.5 to 3 years' time, that is the first time I've clearly heard the bell ring loud, signifying the final and total death of the internal combustion engine. Not because of government legislation or ethical purchasing or fashion, because of economics. A petrol car will be more expensive to buy, massively more expensive to maintain and run, massively more expensive to fuel, and massively filthy and restricted in where it can be used. It is the end. And this is the whole point of what Tesla are doing. Their aim is essentially to kill the internal combustion engine. Now, for my mates who have classic cars and who love to polish them, buff them, and run beautiful old cars, I mean, I don't know if any of them are worrying, but for goodness sake, be quiet, because you don't need to. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about a classic 1957 Jaguar or a 1968 Sunbeam Rapier in mint condition. Those cars are brilliant. You know, they belong in museums, they belong in car shows where you take them for a drive one Sunday morning and you burn stinky petrol. It's fine, because they're a tiny number of the cars that are on the road today. It's the massive billions of cars we've got to get rid of. And not replace them with electric cars, but replace them with other transportation systems. Reduce the number of cars. So it is very interesting. If they can really produce a battery at $48 a kilowatt hour, that is what they said. Remember that number, you know. For a decade now, so everyone, all these pundits, know-alls, futurists, and actual battery scientists have stated the sub $100 per kilowatt hour would mean crossing the cost parity threshold. It means electric cars will be cheaper to buy as well as cheaper to run. So it's going to. A lot of people are saying 2022. I reckon Tesla will lead this march, and it will be more likely 2023 when you can finally buy a really decent, well-made electric car that does probably around 250, 300 miles on a charge, which is totally 100% adequate for less than you can buy a petrol car. And one thing which I admit I missed in the torrent of data that was presented that day, and it was very late by the time they got to the end, so I was basically, I had my head in my hands snoring, is the discovery of gargantuan amounts of lithium in the clay of the Nevada desert. I didn't know there was any lithium there. I'm not sure anyone did. Anyway, they found huge deposits. And where is the gigafactory built? In the Nevada desert. They've literally got to go out the back of the car park, put a shovel in the ground, get a load of clay, shove it in the machine that goes and extracts the lithium, and they're done. Bob's your uncle. Anyway, that's enough about Tesla. Shut up, Robert. Tesla this, Tesla that, Tesla innovation, batteries, Tesla, shut up. Anyway, no more Tesla. So, okay, Tesla, okay, it is a bit Tesla-ish. Okay, no, wait. I'm just saying, some of you may know that Tesla have shops in shopping malls rather than showrooms. You've probably all seen them, even if you haven't got a Tesla, even if you hate Tesla and think that Elon Musk is a Martian lizard. And he just tried to get back home. I got a great tweet about that the other day. Anyway, so that's what they do. So they basically take over a big store in a big shopping mall. They get a couple of cars in it, loads of TVs around the side, all the different coloured paint works and interiors you can get. And if you watch the TVs for long enough, sadly, you'll probably see me sitting in my kitchen talking about my Powerwall, which they filmed years ago. And I want this to be very clear, I didn't get paid for. I didn't receive a fee. I'm always embarrassed because if my agent sees that, she'll have a word or two to say. But anyway, oh God. Anyway, it's different. It's innovative, and judging by the number of Tesla Model 3s zipping around London, it works. So now Polestar are doing exactly the same thing. In fact, so exactly the same, they're using the same shopping mall in London to open their first UK store. It's at Westfield in Shepherd's Bush, West London, and that will be the home of the new Polestar store. They already have stores running in mainland Europe and China, but this one will be the first in the UK, as I said. So if you live in the Greater London area and you want to see, seriously, the beautiful Polestar up close, toddle along there in about a month and you can have a poke around. Can I have a poke around your Polestar? Do you mind? But one more thing on this, I think, this is critically important. In the multi-storey car park beneath the Westfield shopping centre, it's huge! And it's got huge car parks underneath, which is just kind of all wrong anyway, if you look at the grand scheme thing. But anyway, in the massive car parks underneath the Westfield shopping centre is an array of no fewer than 24 Tesla 150 kilowatt superchargers. I've used them. You drive in and your tyres make that nice squeaky sound on the polished concrete as you steer your way into the thing. Plug in, go and do your shopping, have a wee, have a coffee, come back, car's full, drive home. That is critically important. I want to say this to all the other manufacturers. So I would be far more impressed than just a nice shop that sells Polestars if Polestar facilitated the installation of, let's say, 30 or even 40 150 kilowatt rapid chargers from some other network to support the customers who buy their cars, and put those in the car park underneath to give them some reassurance that you can charge these amazing cars. I'm just saying, that's my advice. It's not going to happen, but, you've got to try. Anyway, next, vehicle to grid. If you are a regular listener to this podcast or you watch Fully Charged on YouTube, you will have heard us going on and on about vehicle to grid. It's not that complicated an idea, but actually implementing it is definitely a technical challenge, and at present it's very limited. You need a car with a CHAdeMO charge connector. And if you have an early Nissan Leaf like I do, that one wasn't built to do vehicle to grid, but all the more recent Nissan Leafs in particular are built to do that. But you need that connector, and you also need a very expensive wall box. And all the hassle of setting that up, understanding the software, being in a position with your car to make the best use of the technology. It's very early days for private car owners. But for fleet managers, this is clearly much closer. And the benefits are huge, or just normally voiced, huge. And one of the biggest experiments utilizing vehicle-to-grid technology outside China is in Tottenham, North London. Welcome to Tottenham. Make yourselves at home. So, at the Northumberland Park Garage, 28 double-decker buses capable of delivering more than 1 megawatt of power can release that energy into the grid when demand is high and recharge the buses when demand is low. Hello. Now, this helps make the network more efficient by balancing the peaks and troughs. Now, a fellow called Ian Cameron, who is head of innovation at UK Power Networks, said, and this is a quote, and I don't know what Ian is like, I've never met him, but I want him to be slightly London, all right? So bear with me for a moment. A fleet of bus batteries harnesses large amounts of electricity, and they are habitual with regular and predictable routes, driving patterns and timings. That means we can easily predict and plan how we can use any spare electrical capacity they can offer. Isn't that brilliant? Now, just imagine in, say, 2 or 3 weeks' time, Ian, sorry, I apologise, Ian, has listened to this podcast, and then I meet him somewhere. And actually, it sounds like this. Robert, I don't know why you made me sound Cockney, because actually I'm quite posh. So I don't know anything about Ian Cameron. I don't think he's David Cameron, ex-Prime Minister's brother, but you never know. He might be. Anyway, we're going to try and report on that, because I think that is critically important. Because if you think of the combined might of the delivery and public transport systems of any country, and if you imagine electrifying all of them, so I'm not just being specific to this country, but you imagine Belgium only has electric delivery vehicles, trucks and buses. The Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, Croatia, Italy might do. I hope so. Spain, everywhere. Imagine that the combined energy storage capacity of all those units is mind-boggling. It's in the terawatt hours of electricity. So that is very, very exciting. And I will shortly be chairing a virtual panel discussion on the future of two things: future of fleet management, which is what we're talking about now, and on the future of aviation. And this is at the Net Zero conference organised by Business Green, which is a brilliant publication, online publication, about the kind of business challenges and opportunities in the renewables and clean tech sector. So I'm very happy and flattered to be chairing that. And I much prefer to chair that because then I don't have to know anything. So the clever people I'm talking to actually know stuff. So, and the aviation one, aviation. aviation, because I get very excited about electric aviation, and there is so much happening. It's a huge and complex topic, but the speed of development, it is dizzying, and it's just gone up a gear this week with a big announcement from Airbus Industries. So, to put all this in context, I like putting things in context, you know that, listeners. Putting this in context, there are two really huge civil aviation manufacturing companies in the world, Boeing in the USA and Airbus Industries in Europe. So when one of these announcements of not one, but three new, now listen to this, hydrogen sort of hybrid powered aircraft designs, it's a big deal. And we're not talking little itty-bitty four-seater planes. We're talking great big 120 to 200 passenger aircraft with a range of more than 2,000 nautical miles. Now, nautical mile, 99.9% of you will know what a nautical mile is. But for the one or two of you who don't, that is 1.15 miles as we would recognize them on the Earth's surface. So 2,000 nautical miles is about 2,300 miles, or about getting on for 3,000 kilometers. So it's a decent flight. Pretty much any European city to any other European city, for example. London to Athens, a doddle in this plane. London to Moscow, easy peasy. London to New York, okay, all right, I accept it, a slightly damp landing in the Atlantic just off the coast of Newfoundland. But you know, nearly. Now, I'm going to have a little rant here. It's very little, and I'll be as polite as I can, but I think it's important. Hydrogen is a brilliant fuel that we can utilize in incredibly beneficial ways in flight and in shipping, in heavy haulage, in trains, and in long-term energy storage. It's brilliant in all those settings. The production and storage of hydrogen as a fuel can be locally sourced. Yes, the infrastructure required is expensive. Yes, but the basic ingredients are not fossil fuels from far away that have to be refined and shipped. It's wind and water. So if you're producing large amounts of hydrogen using excess solar and wind, what is not to love? So planes, very, very exciting. Small, incredibly expensive, complex to manufacture. Passenger cars, not so much. And yet one or two manufacturers are still persisting in developing hydrogen fuel cell cars. And this is the thing, I want them to work. As a now regular cyclist, any cyclist, anyone who's walked along a street, what would you rather walk through? A cloud of diesel fumes or some steam and drips of water coming out the back of a hydrogen car? The hydrogen car would be much better, but I'm not sure. I'm not convinced. Anyway, I mean, the reason that the fossil fuel industry in particular and some manufacturers are pushing to convince people, and they have failed abjectly so far, but to convince people that a hydrogen fuel cell car is the answer, is it fits in with their existing business model. Their existing business model, not our experience or our convenience, theirs. They produce fuel, they sell it at specific locations. You can't produce hydrogen in your house. Not for a long time, maybe one day. No one is going to have that simple convenience of refilling their HFC car at home. They want to ensure you have to go to a filling station. You have to give them specifically money to buy the fuel. You have no other choice. Anyway, that's my rant over. Next story, small cars. I love small cars and I cannot lie. We will shortly be reviewing... I'm so excited about this. The Citroën Ami. I don't know why I said Citroën. Citroën. It's so difficult to say Citroën. I say Citroën Ami, which is a ridiculously cute little car that looks like a cross between a stormtrooper's helmet and an egg box. It's tiny. And now VW have admitted, I love it when car companies are admitting that they are working on the ID.1. So we've seen the ID.3, which is a car roughly the size of a Volkswagen Golf, but the ID.1 is very, very small, essentially replacing the VW Up. The thing is, it's becoming increasingly obvious that companies like VW will stop making any combustion cars sooner than anyone predicted, and people will stop buying them even sooner than that. So the ID.3, which was originally scheduled for release The ID1, which was originally scheduled for release in 2025, looks like it could be on the streets a couple of years earlier in 2023. And at the other end of the scale is the rumours around a performance version of the ID3, the IDR. So think like Golf R. So that was my last performance combustion vehicle, was the Volkswagen, the R32. So it was a Volkswagen R32, 3.2 litre V6 engine. Crazy! I did love the sound that car made, I have to say. So there's a lane, a little narrow lane that leads into our village that has high Cotswold stone walls either side, going up a hill. Very picturesque. Sometimes people stop to take pictures of it. Vicarage at the top, church on the left, and lovely little cottage on the right. But this little bit of roadway, very narrow. So when I had the R32 and I used to drive back late at night, I would open all the windows as I drove up that road very slowly. It's a dangerous road. It's got a blind bend at the top. And I'd just drop down a gear and go as it went up that hill, because it had this lovely, beautifully tuned, throaty burble coming out of its twin, massive, fat, footballer-style exhaust pipes. And I drove that car, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is in about 2002, 2003 maybe. Anyway, yeah. So, but the fact that they're going to make an IDR sort of, hot hatchback is quite cool. That will be released around 2023, 24. And then a two-seater VW electric sports car coming in the late 2020s. So they're doing some cool stuff. They've got to. As I keep saying, they've got to. But that's after the ID3, which is out now. I'm driving one next week. And the ID4 crossover, which will be launched soon and will be on fully charged in the next few weeks. And the ID5 sedan, or as we'd call it, saloon car. And there's even rumours of an ID6. And that's really, I think, the camper van that we did review, the very early version of that. Johnny had a drive of it a long time ago. And, people you could tell people want that car. They just were really interested in it, that van. Yeah, I mean, it'd be fantastic. Wouldn't it be great to have an electric camper van with 200-mile range, but really cool looking. Amazing. Nice. Now, of course, regular viewers and listeners to Fully Charged will be very familiar with the advantages of solar power. A recent survey showed that globally, in terms of installation of new generating capacity, solar had the most gigawatts per year of newly installed generating capacity. But one area that might get overlooked by the big energy survey folks is Afghanistan. Now, some of those Afghani hill farmers, they've been installing solar like crazy. I mean, really, it's noticeable. It's been spied on by satellites. Now, is that to be greener, to power their homes in a sustainable and eco-aware way? No, it's to power the water pumps that irrigate the poppy plantations. So, although overall opium production apparently is down in Afghanistan in 2019, opium production remains stable at a mere 6,400 tons, according to the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, the UNODC. I'm with the UNODC, stand back. Afghan farmers began using solar way back in 2013. And by 2019, this is amazing, there were 67,000 solar arrays in Helmand Valley alone. 67,000. That is a lot of pumps, pumping a lot of water for a lot of poppies. Many farms are now getting, basically in desert, but many of them are now getting 2 poppy harvests a year. And installing solar panels and electric pump costs around $5,000. But once installed, there are virtually no running costs. The water is free and the boost to productivity is enormous. Now, I'm not here to discuss the implications of draining their subterranean water table. I dread to think. I cannot imagine how much long-term damage this might be doing. But what is interesting is if you've got 67,000 solar arrays, that means you're not using 67,000 diesel pumps or diesel generators to run the pumps, which meant, of course, hauling fuel up the mountain paths, often on horseback. That's what we're talking. So the fact that they've had to do one journey with a load of solar panels on one side of the donkey and a little water pump and some wire on the other, and they've now got solar-powered pumps. There's going to be an episode on Fully Charged Plus soon about my solar-powered water pumps in my pond, which aerate the water for my fish. Exactly the same technology. It works. Even today, very overcast and raining, I can see the little fountains. It's not a fountain. Waterfall is still going. Blah, 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 blah. That is the sound of water on a waterfall. It's unusual water. I think it might be French. I like to use French water. I've got posh fish. Okay, I mean, it's a good news story in some ways. It's good to know that your Class A drugs are sustainably powered, isn't it? Now, this next story, I have to say, caused me equal amounts of surprise and delight. The UK government is seriously considering bringing the ban on the sale of new petrol and diesel cars forward to 2030. Now, that, dear listeners, is less than 10 years. It's about 9 years, 3 months. This ban was originally slated for 2040, 20 years away, but the government brought it forward to 2035 last year after consulting with the automotive industry and the power industry. And now they're going further, and if this is implemented, it means the UK will be in line with Germany, Ireland, and the Netherlands. I mean, of course, Norway. Norway's going to bring the ban in 2025, in 5 years. It's just unfair. They're always doing better than anyone else. And we still buy their oil and gas. And they're all lovely. And they all speak English. And they're all tall and blonde and handsome. And it makes me sick. Anyway, so will this massive increase in electric vehicles cause chaos and meltdown on the grid? Like so many people have said over the last few years. And when I say people, I mean people who believe the stories paid for by the fossil fuel industry lobbyists. The answer is a stark no. This is a quote from a Guardian article. Graham Cooper, who we've had on the show, who we've spoken to many times, he's an amazing guy. Graham, and who's appeared at Fully Charged Live. Graham Cooper, the director of in charge of the National Grid's electric vehicle project, told The Guardian that fears over the UK's electricity grid's ability to cope with the boom in electric vehicles and recharging were unfounded. This is what he said. He said, confident that a faster transition is possible. As in, he is confident. Because I copied that quote and forgot the he is bit. Okay, I'm going to do that bit again because I just want to make it clear. Graham Cooper said he is confident that a faster transition is possible and that that the grid is suitably robust to cope with the rise in electricity demand. He's a lovely chap, and he knows his grid stability. Oh, Graham, yeah, he knows his grid stability. Graham, how stable is the grid at the moment? It's very stable, Robert. Thanks. That's very nice to know. Thank you. Now, before I toddle off for some soup and a soft bread roll from my lunch, I just wanted to end on a prospective good news story from the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. And just to repeat, in the show notes are the links to all the stories I've talked about in this podcast. So, the basic story is this. In Europe, North America and Australia, it is now accepted across the board that renewable energy generation is cheaper than coal and gas generation. The only thing putting a damper on being able to shift our entire energy needs to renewables is, of course, storage. Now, I know I drone on about batteries until people run away screaming, but this isn't a battery as we might recognise it. It's a plan to store vast amounts of electricity under the sea. That's a diver. Well, it's probably a diver drowning, but it's meant to be a diver with bubbles coming out. Sorry, just to explain. Now, imagine in the UK we had the ability to store multiple terawatts of electricity around the coast under the water. We could literally tell our children and grandchildren that electricity came from mermaids and sea nymphs who grew it in pretty gardens under the waves. And they harvested it every now and then and put it in little packets to send to us. You know, you could spin some story like that. In fact, it might make quite a good sort of children's sci-fi book. Anyway, so you've got your electricity supply from wind and solar. On a windy, sunny day, it is way, way more than the country can possibly use at any one moment. That's the way we're heading. You store the excess in pretty massive concrete domes. They've even worked out how to build them under the sea. Concrete domes that rest on the seabed about 700 meters down. That's quite deep. The energy from wind and solar runs pumps that force air into these massive concrete domes, which, by the nature of the water pressure at that depth, is pretty intense. And when you need the power, you release a valve, the water goes back into the massive dome, pushing the air out, but it passes a series of turbines which spin generators, and you get your stored power back. Sure, there would be losses, but the initial electricity isn't costing you anything, so it doesn't really matter. Now, each 30-metre diameter dome, so they're quite big, according to the Institution of Mechanical Engineers in the United Kingdom, can hold around 27 megawatt hours of electricity. Each dome would have an output of 5 megawatts, so that's as much as it would be able to produce, 5 megawatts, which is a lot. That's a big wind turbine. So at about the same as a mid-sized offshore wind turbine, but being turned on at exactly when you need it. And they have done an economic assessment of building 100 of these domes, so a total storage of 2.7 gigawatt hours. Now, in the past, I saw proposals for large underwater balloons that could store air at high pressure. That was for air, not water. You store air at high pressure, and then you use that air to run turbines to turn generators. And these systems, the thing with, if you fill a balloon with air underwater, it kind of wants to go all floaty. So you have to have massive weights to stop them bobbing to the surface. Clearly, a concrete dome is not going to suffer the same sort of problem. And I think this idea has real potential. So researchers have been scouring the seabed maps to discover if this is a plausible solution to storing global levels of electricity. And they found many very suitable sites between 600 and 700 meters depth, considered to be the most economic when considering the amount of concrete needed and the weight and strength of the structures. A survey found that these optimal sites alone could provide, this is extraordinary, a total global storage capacity of 817 terawatt hours. Now that represents approximately 2 days of the world's total energy consumption. We're using about 400 terawatt hours a day. So you would never just store it all and then let it all go for 2 days. That's not how it works. But you can balance your generating capacity, because your generating capacity never stops. Even if it is dark and the wind isn't very strong, it's always operating a little bit, especially wind turbines. The storage units would be located close to offshore wind turbines, and this is where they're getting really interesting. That's further reducing the need for more and more transmission infrastructure. It would all be using the same transmission infrastructure. And floating wind turbines would be particularly well suited to using these things due to the requirement for deep water, which you need deep water for a floating wind turbine because it's a massive thing and it's got a big underwater bit that's floating. And the fact that the concrete spheres can serve a double duty as anchor points for the turbines. Anyway, I just love that idea, and I just want one of these, like gravitricity, the big weight that you drop down a coal mine, all the kind of pumped storage stuff. Pumped storage is kind of barking mad, but it works, and we've been using it for decades. It's really, really efficient way of storing huge amounts of electricity. We've just got to be imaginative. We do need to be able to store terawatt hours globally, many terawatt hours. Anyway, I think that's a good story to end on. I hope you enjoyed this particular episode. I've enjoyed presenting it to you, if that's what I've been doing. I don't even know. Just been sitting here waffling. So please do. So, it was kind of really nice if you subscribe to this podcast. We're going to keep it going through thick and thin. We're still hoping, fingers are crossed. It's very difficult to write a note because my fingers are crossed about the drive-in cinema in the end of October. It's looking like we can still do it at the moment, but who knows? Nobody. And but that we'll get through it, whatever happens. Loads more episodes coming up on Fully Charged on YouTube. As I mentioned, Amazon Prime, we're going to sort of announce that. I'm saying this on the podcast. I probably shouldn't be saying it because we haven't quite finalised everything, but there's clearly moves afoot for us to appear on Amazon Prime, which is very exciting. No adverts. Really, really quite an exciting prospect. There aren't any episodes on Amazon Prime now, so there's no point looking. But we're about to start on that one. As I said right at the beginning, all the notes to all the stories I've mentioned today are in the show notes for this episode. So please subscribe to this. Please subscribe to Fully Charged on YouTube if you haven't already. Some great episodes with other people, not me, proper, well-educated people that know stuff. And what else was it? Oh, God, Patreon and YouTube membership. So either of those, lovely. Please do have a look at either of those because that is absolutely what's kept us alive this year. That's all, though, really. If you have been, thank you for listening.